What is going on, guys, gals, gentlemen, ladies, all of the sports fans across the world? You are on the sidelines with the Sideline guys, and today I'm joined by two very esteemed co-hosts. The first on my left, we have the Podfather himself. The reason why we are all here today, my guy, Derrick Myers. And then, of course, we have another awesome addition to the show. First time I'm gonna be it's interesting. First time I feel like we're putting him on the spot, football wise. So really excited to talk some football with my guy Sean Negron. How's it going, you guys?
Good, man. Good. Finally get glad to be on the show with Sean as well, man. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, man. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for thinking of me, Derek. Like I said, always good to good to finally meet you, and it's always good to talk sports, especially now talking football.
Yes, sir.
Very excited. Let's get going.
Yes, sir. So, with that all being said, we want to make sure we remind you before we get started to follow the brand at OTS Media Co. and OTS Media on YouTube. So, OTS Media Co., all other platforms, Twitter, all that other good stuff. You can find us there, OTS Media Co., and then OTS Media on YouTube. Make sure you're liking everything, subscribed, hitting that notification bell so you'll get all the alerts straight to your phone whenever we drop any of this awesome new content for you guys. Really going to be a lot of focused content coming up during this week. It's going to be a rapid fire week to say the least, but a lot of really good stuff on the MMA boxing side, as well as, of course, getting into the thick of these football previews, right? And that's what we are brought here today to do, fellas. So I'm really excited. Just to give you all a heads up, today we're going to be doing a section that I like to call fantasy thoughts, right? We're going to get all kinds of different fantasies, fetishes, and all kind of beautiful things here on today's show, contemplating what the outlook for a lot of these different teams are going to be fantasy wise, right? What players do we should we have an eye on? What sort of workload changes can we anticipate that might make someone that was a third round pick last year, a first round pick this year, right? These are all the kinds of things we're going to be questioning. But what makes it so exciting is none of us have a damn idea about what the questions are going to be, who we're going to be ridiculing, or anything really. So I'm really excited to see where this show ends up going. But before that, I just want to go round robin to make sure that we also give out our individual socials, right? So that we're also following us on all different platforms. So for me, you could catch me on Twitter at Negron MMA, as well as at Instagram at Chris Negron underscore. Where can I find you guys?
Chris?
You can find me at Sean Negron 26. Sorry, you can find me at
No,
Sean
I
Negron 26. I didn't mean to interrupt you if you were talking, and then you can find me on my website at BS Reports. Um, I have a website, bsreports.org. You can, anytime, if you're interested in writing or being a podcaster, anything involving sports, you need help anyway, reach out to me. I'll always help you. I'll get you started. And I have a little bit of some connections and I can, you know, kind of lead you if you're in the world of sports and that's what you want to do for your future.
yeah. No, I was apologizing because I called you Chris, not Sean. It's it's Negron threw me off.
Yes.
But yeah, you can follow me at Derrick. That's Derrick underscore OTS, Derrick, the black way to spell it.
Yes, sir. So now that all the pleasantries are out the way, right? I'm excited because as the host, I can just kind of throw things on people, right? And it's their responsibility to catch it, right? So, Sean, we're starting off with the Buffalo Bills out here in the AFC East. We're going to be touching on all of these different teams, obviously, in this division as we go. But start us off with the Buffalo Bills. What kind of strange things are on your mind when it comes to the Buffalo Bills?
I don't know if there's strange things, but I have a little bit of a hotter take, and I feel like this is it couldn't be considered obvious, but I feel that this whole team is Josh Allen or not. And if Josh Allen performs to the way Josh Allen was, not necessarily last year, I think that was a little bit of a down year, but if he performs to the way he was, the way he usually is, Bills will always be a top AFC team, AFC East team. They'll win the division. I still think they're better than the Jets, even with the hype now. Um, but if Allen goes down in any way, this team crumbles. This team, I feel like, only has him, and it kind of reminds me of a situation that, as a Jet fan, that I'm gonna have to deal with. But I felt this way last year, and I felt like it kind of got exposed a little bit, even though Allen did play it basically the entire time. I think for like except for a couple handful of plays, 2 games or something like that. But if he goes down for more than 2 or 3 games, then you're talking about a serious issue here. I don't. I think Kyle Allen is the backup now, but still, like, there's nothing there that's significant. That if Allen goes down, can you look at this team going into week to week, going, the Bills are the favorite because they're a good team, but I don't think they're enough. And I think because Josh Allen's the top 3 quarterback in this league, that's the reason why they're so heavily favored. But if he goes down or if any injury happens, even if it's lingering or not, this team's in trouble. And I think that's the issue here.
It's a real great shout. Yes, it's Matt Barkley and then Kyle Allen sitting in that backfield as well. So a
Matt
couple of guys,
Barkley,
right? Right? Crazy.
USC. Oh my lord, what is that? Like 11 years of nothing. I love that. Good for him. Good for
Yeah,
him.
he's somehow still collecting a paycheck, right? Shout out
Yeah,
to Chip
that's the
Kelly.
best
Yeah,
job in football. Backup quarterback, third string. You're never playing. You're
sure.
just collecting $1 million to do nothing. The
Yeah,
best job
get
in
a
football right there.
get a good seat too.
Exactly. Perfect.
Certainly,
Yeah.
certainly get a good see. I think to re-gear it right to a fantasy perspective, that's a really good point. I think if we're dealing with um a situation where even if for 3 games, right, Josh Allen is out, the value, right, on Stephon Diggs, on Kincaid even, right? I know a lot of people
Mhm.
are high on him, so I agree. I think if there's ever an instance throughout the season where he's not able to play consistently or perform consistently, right? Because I think that's also a concern when considering Josh Allen. It isn't just whether or not he's healthy, but whether or not he's in the right headspace. I feel like there's a lot of stretches the last 3 years that we could point to, really, where he just gets out of character for some time, and obviously, sometimes you got to get back into rhythm, right? But being known for having those kind of streaks on top of a very thin depth chart behind you, definitely not a good place to be, in my opinion. So, are there any
Yeah.
other questions you guys have specifically about the Buffalo Bills when it pertains to fantasy? I think the one thing I wanted to ask you guys when considering this is what kind of upside do you think Dalton Kincaid has in his rookie season? Obviously, there's a lot of big hype considering another target, right? Another potential target to for Josh Allen to pass to. Obviously, they're I don't know why I always do this, man. I start my point. Gabriel Davis. Yes.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I completely almost forgot his name, but I feel like every year Gabe Davis has been penciled in as the guy that's really gonna have the buoy, right? The secondary target share besides
Mhm.
Stephon Diggs. And last year didn't really pan out that way, right? So I'm interested to see whether or not Dalton Kincaid can sort of fill some of that void and what his place will be in the offense as a rookie. So I'm curious, do you guys think he has serious upside as a potential top 15 tight end this season in standard draft, or is that just reaching?
Uh, well, let me ask you: oh, what's his name? Knox. Is Knox still on the roster?
Yeah.
Yep.
So is he number one? He's
Yeah.
number one for them? I don't know if I could say top 15.
No. Yeah. Sorry.
I don't know if I can say top 15. He should produce though for them. He should. I think their tight end situation really isn't my question for them from a fantasy perspective. I think from a fantasy perspective, the biggest question I've had for them is their run game. Like Singletary was absolute garbage fantasy wise for the last 2-3 years or so. Like he's been really bad. There was just times of spurts that you see where he can produce, but he doesn't remain consistent. So my biggest question from a fantasy perspective for them is, does James Cook insert himself as a number one? and take over. I would like to see it. I think with a more dynamic run game, it makes the Bills even more dangerous, honestly. Um, which I think sets up the world for Josh Allen. So I mean, I honestly for them, I hope they hit big for him with Cook because uh honestly it'd be nice to draft a running back from the Bills this year to that actually does something. Like I could if he actually lives up to his potential, I would like to get him in some leagues. I'm gonna do a couple leagues. In some league I would like to get him and put him in flex. That's where I was putting Singletary for the most part the last year and a half. And last year, I definitely said I wasn't drafting Singletary, and then I found myself in a spot where I needed to get him. So it was like that was a horrible place to feel to be. But if he can produce, maybe wait, is Singletary even on the roster anymore? He is,
No,
right?
no.
No,
Singletary
it's not.
is on the Texans, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
something
Oh
like
my
that. Yeah,
god.
Cook
Okay,
is going to be the starter.
Cook is the
He should
starter.
be. I think
So
he's a second round pick from last year, right? If I remember
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So
I would like to
it's going to be
see
his to lose.
yeah, I would like to see him insert himself as the guy. If he doesn't, then it starts to make you wonder one what's wrong with their run game and their offense in total because they've been switching people out for the longest time. I don't think they've had if I'm not if I'm not mistaken, I think they haven't had a consistent running game uh since LaShawn McCoy, right?
Yeah, right around.
That sounds about right.
And even then, that was like post
And that was
prime
still
Shady as
shaky.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
still shaky.
I don't.
So
I honestly. I'm sorry to cut you off. I just
no,
when it comes to the RV position and this team, I would never be interested in
never.
drafting anyone, just because
yeah,
I feel like they're gonna try the same thing they did almost last year with Naheem Hines, like where it's really
He's out
screen
for the year, right?
packages.
and
Yeah,
he's out
yeah,
for the
he
year. Oh my
yeah,
god.
it's really screen packages and
Yeah.
sort of dish outs if the play isn't going according to plan. I don't see the Bills ever heavily relying on the run game in any situation. And to me, it's one of the most frustrating things in football
Yeah.
because I really think a solid run game could do so much for that offense and his dynamic playmaking ability under a sort of shotgun system or converted, right, where you could have shotgun sets into play action sets into straight running, like having that
Yeah.
triple option versus a spread offense, which yes, you do get a lot of plays from the shotgun, but for the most part, um we're defending pass primarily, right? We don't really, and then we're gonna spy you, right? Because we know at some
Hmm.
point you're gonna try to run out. So
Yeah.
um I think not only will it do a lot to sort of set up the other parts of the offense, but I think it'll really extend Josh Allen's career. Because like you mentioned
Yeah.
earlier, Sean, they're really asking a lot of him on every single play, let alone every single game.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that was the way the offense was built. Like they've built
Hmm.
this entire offense to be very pass first, and I think that's why certain teams have beaten them. And even and like I don't like to keep mentioning my favorite team, but the Jets have beaten them. I think 3 years in a row, obviously, and split in the times where the Jets were a horrible team. Not last year, but like the Jets have figured out that they're going to pass 2 out of 3 minimum, right? You know, you might get that run on first down for 2 yards, and maybe on a second down on a random spot, but you know third down's coming, and it's 95% of the time he's passing. Like you know it. And that was the thing. That's why I was saying, like, if this team was more of a balanced team and it had that running back, you know, you only have James Cook and Latavius Murray. Like, and Latavius has bounced around. I like him, but not sold necessarily on him. I don't think a lot of teams are.
Right.
Damian Harris from the Patriots is now over there. So they're going to do the same thing that they did last year, where they're going to bounce 2 or 3 running backs at a time. And James Cook is definitely going to be the number one. He was sort of a number three, but they're going to rely on kind of what they had when Frank Gore was there, where they're going to have a guy who's a speed back, kind of handle the, you know, the short passes, and then you're gonna have like the Frank Gorsu. If you need that 3rd and 1 or you need that 2nd and 1 real quick, get Damian Harris up there and just push up the middle. Latavius can kind of handle it out of the backfield, and I think that's what they're gonna do. But this is going to be a very, very passer friendly offense. And what I was trying to say is that if Allen, anything happens to Allen, then Diggs and Davis, both of their stock are going to drop significantly. And from what you were saying, I would 100% stay away from a running back in the Bills.
Oh yeah.
They're not rushing a lot. I don't know when the last time they had a thousand yard rusher, especially now that we got 17 games. Singletary had 819. I just saw it now for last year, and he played 16 games.
Yeah.
That's 51 a game. That's nothing. Um,
Yeah.
so it's
I
not
almost
the worst because he averages 4.5 a yard, but they're
mm,
not running the ball enough because it's
I
so
almost
unexpected.
I almost wonder if their run game does um get a little better, mainly because even Josh Allen came out this offseason and said that he realizes that he needs to slow it down a little bit with all the rushes, especially the way that he runs, right? Like he goes with no regard, and I mean you like to see it, but at the same time you don't. And I think if that's his mindset coming into the season, I wonder if that does open up the run game for those running backs, which is why I've got a question mark on Cook, because it's like if that's the case, that should mean, not that it will be, but it should mean that you might get more value than you otherwise would from their running backs.
That's a great shout. I agree 100%. Now, my main question before we move on from the Buffalo Bills, if you had one pick out of any other offensive player besides Josh Allen, obviously, who would that be and why? And remember, you got to consider value in this, right? You're not going to get Stephon Diggs with a fifth round pick. You might be able to get Gabe Davis or a Dalton Kincaid or someone like that in that range. So interested to see who you guys are looking at sort of for that key target at that sweet spot for the Bills.
Yeah, you're saying which round is this? This is the first round?
Doesn't matter. I would say what do you consider value wise the best Bills player besides Josh Allen to have on your team
Okay.
and why?
Um, it's tough depending on the situation. If I can get a earlier round and I can get Gabriel Davis, that would be great because he's a solid number two. I like him, but I'm a big fan of Dawson Knox still. He may not grab a lot of yards, but he gets touchdowns.
Yeah.
And tight end is a very tough position to have a dominant piece in. There's really only like three or four guys that if you see someone with them, the Kettles and you know those guys of the world, you're kind of like I kind of lost that position already. So if you can get someone like Dawson Knox who, on a 3rd and 2 at the 3 yard line, you're most likely it's going to him on a floater to the corner. Like he's always the guy Allen's looking at in those situations, and which happen at least 2 or 3 times every game. So I always look at stuff like that, or him for a first down, depending on how people score. But um, he's probably the one I'd probably go with, like a 14th, 15th round or 13th round tight end pickup because depending on how many people you do in a league. But that's someone I would do as a little sleeper late pick. And Kincaid, I think, will have his time, like you were mentioning before. But I believe that it'll happen because he's probably like a fourth option right now. I think he'll have 400 or 500 yards in the season as a rookie. It's tough as a second tight end to kind of mix them in, but I think Knox, because Knox has been the guy for them for the last 2 years, a nice solid piece to get first downs, touchdowns. I think that Knox is probably the guy you want as a fantasy pickup, for a mid to late edition.
Yeah. No, I'll say him as well. I was gonna say Matt Barkley, but
How dare you? How dare you?
no, but I'd say Knox as well because he's like he's a safer bet outside of Diggs, outside of Allen. He's a safer bet because I mean, like we discussed, Gabe Davis hasn't shown up the way that, at least on a fantasy perspective, he hasn't shown up the way that we have hoped he would have. and their run game is just not going to be what we want it to be to definitively say that you're going to be able to get some good value there. I think as a bench, if you're talking about from your bench though, I think one of the running backs could be a good option just to have one on a bye week, um, or in case of an injury. But like Knox is the only one that makes sense to me too.
I agree with that. I can't really complain. I wanted to set up the potential debate, right? Because I feel like I could see a scenario where Dalton Kincaid is really used like a slot receiver and not like a blocking
Okay.
tight end at all. I
Yeah.
could see a scenario like that playing out. And in standard leagues, at least, right? In dynasties, it's really hard to get a rookie like Kincaid because everyone is targeting these kind of guys, right? And
Mhm.
picks are a different commodity there. So I feel like in standard fantasy leagues, Kincaid might really be someone to look at. Same situation you were saying with Knox as a later round scenario, but he could really, in my opinion, end up taking the brunt of the offense if anyone else around him either it gets injured in the meantime or anything like that. Um, so he's someone that I'm also targeting. Obviously, Diggs is who Diggs is, right? No matter what, you're gonna want to have him on your team if you can. But I don't know what it is about this year with the Bills. I'm a little concerned, right? Like I feel like
Mhm.
it's very easy to feel like every year contender is gonna contend, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
I feel like at some point I expect this team to take some regression, and it might be this year, to be honest. But we can keep an eye on that and give you updates on that as the season rolls around. But next up, our next team on the list, we have the Miami Dolphins, and to that I will be throwing to you, good sir, Derrick. What
Sir.
questions do you have when it comes to fantasy for the Dolphins?
Ooh. Um, their defense. I think defense honestly is from a fantasy perspective, I think it's one of the more overlooked positions. Um, Mainly if you're doing team defense. Like if you do IDP, that's different. But because Jalen Ramsey's injury, you're bringing Eli Apple in. God bless him. But I think that that's going to be the question mark, right? Like he's going to leave a lot of holes in that defense. Like Eli Apple being there is going to, I think, like he's an okay player. He's not someone that you look at and you feel confident is going to be able to hold it down while Ramsey is rehabbing. You know what I'm saying? And that's so for me. I think from a fantasy perspective, their defense is probably one of the biggest question marks right now, because of Ramsey's absence.
It's a really good shout. I agree. I tend to think that their defense, obviously, with Ramsey, in my opinion, it still is. There still are question marks there. I feel like there's a
Yeah,
revolving door at DB
yeah,
for this team. Like they're constantly switching out their pass rushers, and I get it, right? It's a lot of old regime, new regime kind of situations, especially since Mike, what is this? Mike McCarthy? No,
no, no, Mike. Yeah, he
McDaniel's.
just yeah,
McDaniels. Yes.
because he also be say Mike Malone, bro.
Too many mics, goddamn it, across all the sports we love. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a fan of him as a coach, and I think
Mm,
the part that you mentioned defensively that plays into the offense too, right? If you're gonna have a defense that maybe isn't able to stop teams on a consistent basis, then it opens things up for the offense that's already so explosive, right? Two of the best
right.
receivers in the league, and who knows if Dalvin Cook ends up here at running back either, right? So um, I'm so I'm honestly not used to even considering right drafting the Dolphins as my defense, right?
Yeah.
I'm definitely not going to be looking to do that this year.
Yeah.
Never really looked at as a strong suit in that way. But if they're even worse than they could have been, right? Then
Hmm.
that's something to consider for the offensive side of the ball, whether or not that changes the way they're moving things around.
Yeah.
Sean, how do you feel about this?
Ooh. Okay. So I agree with the defensive part. I don't want to keep making this like an obvious point, But to agree with the defensive part, like you were saying, I think a big one has to go with Bradley Chubb and how he
Oh yeah,
handles. Ever since he came over to Miami, he was a shell of himself. He,
yeah.
giving up that first round pick, signing that huge extension. He never turned out to be what he was supposed to be, and that was a big
Hmm.
problem. And then I felt like the team kind of crumbled within, with that. DB is definitely an issue when you're bringing in Eli Apple. I don't think a single team has ever liked him as a person, and
Yeah,
people try to get rid of him almost every time they sign him. So
yeah.
I expect him to be out the door as soon as Ramsey's ready to come back in the door. And Eli Apple has his moments, but I'm it's gonna be funny when Eli Apple and uh, Hill meet up because of all the trash talk they did 2 years ago. But
Exactly.
if I had to make my own opinion, I feel like it was the underlying story of the entire Dolphins season last year. Started off red hot. They beat the Bills, one of the hottest games you'll ever see. But the constant issue was Tua. Was
Hmm.
Tua healthy? And the thing was is that I expected the Dolphins to go out and kind of get a better backup. So I'm not saying Tua is my X factor here. If you're looking at it in a fantasy perspective, I've always been a fan of Jalen Waddle. I think he's going to have a better year this year, but at the same time, I can't be definitive because I'm not sure how healthy Tua will ever be.
Right.
One tough hit, he might be out, and then we're relying on Jets legend Mike White, and like that's who you're going to as your backup, and that's not a backup you're going to rely on for more than a week and a half, maybe two. He has his moments, but he is super exposed. He cannot make the second read. And if you're just going to throw it up to hope, Hill is going to grab it every single time, that can't and it won't work. Um, I'm a little nervous on the Dolphins. I think they can be a great team, but if I had to choose, I would say the defense, but I would probably avoid. But if there was someone I had to draft in the Dolphins team, I would say Jalen Waddle, probably in like the fifth or sixth round. He was red hot for them in the earlier in the season. Tyreek Hill and him were like a perfect duo. They like led the league in receiving yards when they were all healthy at the same time. And then when Tua got unhealthy and all the shit that happened with him, it just never went the same. So if Tyreek Hill is going to go within the first like 2 rounds, 3 rounds, 4 rounds, whatever, so I would say Waddle is my choice. I would stay away from Tua because I don't think Tua is a 17 game player. I
Hmm.
don't think he's a 12 game player. I think injuries will always catch up to him. Unfortunately, he's a smaller dude and a pretty light guy. I feel like any big hit from a 300 pounder will send him to a different stratosphere mentally, unfortunately. And I think we may be having a conversation within this year whether he will continue to play football. That's how nervous I am for him going into
Yeah,
this year. And
yeah,
so if I had to choose someone, I would choose Waddle and stay away from the defense and the offense, honestly.
yeah.
Ooh, that's a tough one, especially considering I just drafted Tua as my primary QB in my startup dynasty draft. So definitely a little stressful there. But I did start the year kind of knowing that I would be trying to do a quick rebuild, right? Draft just started and already trying to do a quick rebuild, but traded back in the draft and I'm interested to see how that plays out. But I agree. I think it's such a weird thing, right? Because it's so easy to say, hey, this person has had an injury history, so it's most likely this is going to happen. Um, but you also have to count in sort of the freak nature of injuries, right? Like,
Hmm.
especially with what he was dealing with. If anything, that is more habitual, right, than most other injury prone type players actually is. Like, usually people are like, oh, that person's always injured, but it's not the same thing. Like the fact that it's been the same thing for him is very, very concerning, 100%. But I remember a time, right, where Brandon Cooks was constantly being talked about as someone that can't stay on the field because he has concussion issues, and
Yeah,
I can't remember that being a topic of conversation for the last 3 or 4 years now at this point. So, this is something that obviously you would love to see Tua get past, right? As just a fan in general, right? We want to see people actualize their potential. But at the same time, I understand why everyone's wary. But sometimes you gotta take your shots, baby. So I'm not fully out on Tua just yet. I think at the end of this year, if things continue in that negative direction, I just might be. But with that being said, Derek, what were you about to jump in there and say?
Yeah, quick question about the Dolphins, real quick. You and I discussed last week um, about Carson Wentz. Would you take a flyer on him as the backup?
Who is there currently? That's a good question.
Skylar
Um,
Thompson and Mike White.
yeah,
Oh yeah. Honestly, no. Like
no,
Mike White is that and more, if you ask me. When you consider the Jets' offense last year and what they had available to them, respectfully, after Garrett went down, right? Like the fact that
yeah,
he was able to make things work in that system, that made Zach Wilson look like an absolute lost man out there. I don't have high hopes for Mike White. Don't get me wrong here, right? But as far as upside, in my opinion, the last thing you want behind an injured quarterback is an injured quarterback, and I feel like you'll be setting yourself up for that one with Carson, in my opinion.
yeah. The only reason why I ask is because I think Tua could play long enough that it would, if if Wentz were signed and he were needed, I think he could hold the fort until Tua came back. You see what I'm saying? Like
Hmm.
he could have a good stretch right there where he's healthy and it's just like, hey, boom, to reset his market value.
Hey, that's a good point. I just feel like Mike White. I
No,
have the
I get
same.
it.
I have the same trust and credence, right, in Mike White than I
Yeah.
would. But even then, right, it's kind of like it's so weird, right? I feel like every year, there's always surprises, right? There's always going to be
Yeah.
someone that comes out and balls out whenever given an opportunity, and then it kind of changes the way you view them, right? So, um, I'm never big on QB depth as a thought because if you're already
Mhm.
past your first string QB, it's kind of
Yeah.
like the battle's already half lost, in my opinion. But I wouldn't hurt, right, to have Carson Wentz maybe behind Mike White because I would think Mike White would win out that backup spot.
Hmm.
But yeah, I can't think of many other good places, so might need to find a home for Carson Wentz somewhere, right?
I don't know if necessarily it'll happen because I believe they signed Mike White to be the
He is the second.
1A. Because
Okay.
Mike White, this is the problem with Mike White, right? He is a gamer. He will absolutely lay everything down. Doesn't matter. He will put his body on the line every single play. But in the NFL, that lasts maybe 2 to 3 weeks before you're hurt. And just like
Yeah.
the last 2 years, he became the guy, but then he got hurt being the guy. And then,
Hmm.
we're relying on Zach Wilson again. And I don't even know who the other guy who came into play on Thursday Night Football against the Jaguars. Like, there's guys you don't even know. Like, you're like, who's this guy?
Yeah.
Like, it's
Yeah.
because you've
Yeah.
relied on Mike White to be the guy, and he has it. He's got incredible talent. He just can't stay on the field because he's just too much of a gamer in a way. He's the exact opposite of Tua, where
Hmm.
Tua is, can scramble and he gets hurt by creating an extra play, while Mike will just stand there in the pocket and get obliterated, but have a perfect
Right.
ball.
Right.
And you also have Skylar Thompson, who almost got him that playoff win last year. He was their starter for a while. They kind of liked him. I think they went into it like, oh, who cares? He's the third string. They had what's his name as the backup there, the former Vikings
Bridgewater.
quarterback, the
Bridgewater.
Bridgewater. Yes, thank you.
Mhm.
He was supposed to be the guy, but he kept getting hurt, and then Skylar kind of
Yeah.
proved that he's an NFL type quarterback, not a starter, but a good backup. So I think they look at those two guys as competition for number two, and probably Mike White to win. And then, Skylar's like a perfect option three. And I don't think they want to put in any money in Carson Wentz. I think Carson Wentz is still asking for a lot. And I think, with who he is as a person, not a lot of people have liked. He's not the greatest of locker room presence either. And I think, for a guy who's not even a starting quarterback anymore, teams that don't have to rely on him and with the locker room presence that he brings, I think everyone's just kind of like, I'll pass. I'll grab him when I need him, and if not, then I'll be fine.
Yep.
Do you agree with those sentiments, Derek? I'm curious.
I
Is he
agree.
was
I
he
agree.
looked at as a cancer back in the day for Philly?
I wouldn't say necessarily a cancer, but he was someone that a good amount of guys did not vibe with.
Yeah.
Like you could stay in the locker room with him, right? But he's just one of those guys where it's like, you know how you have those coworkers where you know you can just kind of like you can be around just to work, but as soon as you don't need to be around them anymore, you need to go.
You see them
That's
outside of
Carson Wentz.
work, and you're just like, oh God,
Yeah,
why
yeah.
why are you
If I
here?
run if I bump into you in Publix, it's like leave me alone. But
Yeah.
I think he's that guy. Yeah.
And I don't even know necessarily how much of that happened in Philly. Like I
Oh, a
think
lot. That
yeah.
last year. Yeah,
Well, yeah, well,
the
definitely
last
that
transit.
last year. That
That
was
last year
that was
was
brutal.
bad.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then
that
I
last year
think
was
it
bad.
happened even worse with Indianapolis with the collapse that they had. They had a playoff spot locked up, and then to
Yeah,
lose to the worst team in Jacksonville on the last week, and in the way he handled that, and he's pointing fingers and placing blame, and then he goes to the Commanders, and then he wasn't even it was worse even there, and then the whole situation around him has been terrible. He was off, and then they had Heineke come in, and Heineke was doing great, but then Wentz was ready to come back healthy. They put him back in, realized he was terrible, put Heineke back in, and it was just like
hmm
it changed the entire locker room. And I think he's not a
yeah,
great locker room presence, and I think that's what leads to the reason why he's not on an NFL team now. He's got some talent, but no one wants to necessarily be around him, and
but
he's
he's
not
not
a
a leader.
leader. Yeah, exactly. He's not a leader, and when you don't have a leader as your starting quarterback, I'm not gonna ride or die for you. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna
Yeah,
do it.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and you know that situation very well with the Cougar hunter himself in Zach Wilson.
yeah,
So, with that being said, let's move on to the Patriots. Right, this is a team that I find very interesting. Right,
yeah.
for a lot of different reasons, and in my opinion, none of them are good. um, my question to you guys is: do you think the production last season from Ramondre Stevenson was a flash in the pan? Or do you believe that's something that could be sustainable into this year?
Hmm. I think it could be. I think will it is the question.
Yeah,
I I don't know what we're getting with this team. Like I the of course a lot of the stuff that's been coming out of training camp is a lot of there's a lot of positivity coming out of there. A lot of people feel good about the roster they have right now. But I don't know. I don't know if everything gets put together. I think I almost wonder, and this is not even from a fantasy perspective. This is just football in general. I almost wonder um if why am I blanking on his name? The coach. Um I
Belichick,
want to keep yeah, I keep wanting to say Bill O'Brien. I don't know why.
one
I'm
of the
sorry.
greatest
I am
coaches of all
exhausted.
time.
Yeah, I'm exhausted. That's why I'm sorry.
I hear you.
But I almost wonder if he's if they don't make it to the playoffs, are you looking at
He's done.
him being on the hot seat?
Yeah, he's done.
He's
He
done.
gets.
They'll never fire him. No.
Yeah, they won't.
That's why that's see, and that's what that was the question I was going to ask too. Do you think it's that he's going to get fired or that he retires? Because like I don't know what they're doing. Like if they're in a space where they're not competing this year, I mean, you bring in Juju Smith, uh, for whatever that means, and you didn't get DeAndre Hopkins. You know what I'm saying? Like it almost sounded like they were close in numbers on the DeAndre Hopkins out front, and I don't know why they didn't go for it. So like I don't know because I think if you added Hopkins to that offense, that unlocks so many guys. Like Mac Jones has a phenomenal year. I think Juju has a great year. Ramondre, of course, definitely has a great year. I think those are like guarantees that you kind of removed. So I don't know what this even from a fantasy perspective. I don't know how to look at this team this year. I would almost wonder if Juju could be like one of those guys you look at for your flex.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean that'd be cool, but I don't know. I don't know. I mean, Mac Jones seems like the guy right now, right? Like moving forward for a little while, he seems like the guy.
Seems is the key word there. Sean,
That's what I'm saying. Like like there's so many question marks. I think they would have solidified a lot of stuff just by signing Hopkins, and you didn't. So I don't know what the whole thought process was with that.
Yeah, I think that's why Belichick's on the hot seat because he's not just a coach; he's the general manager. And
Oh
for
yeah, yeah,
two
yeah, yeah, yeah.
years, he's kind of sat still and done nothing to fix his team. They're a mediocre team, and you know, I feel like a lot of questions have come out: who was really who? Like, did Tom Brady make Belichick? Did Belichick make Brady? I still believe that they both made each other. But Brady kind of took everything that he learned and brought a championship to Tampa Bay. While Belichick kind of had to start over, that team had no money to make, and they spent everything to make sure Brady had one final shot. And in his final year, they had nothing to their name, and that's why Brady left. And just the whole and the fact that the relationship between him and Brady had fallen when it should have never fallen, that kind of opened the door and opened people's eyes. And in
Mm,
the last 2 or 3 years of the last 2 years, especially with Mac Jones, hasn't cut it. You're going to Zappy. You're holding on to Brian Hoyer way past any point of NFL relevancy.
true.
Like there's nothing there that you're going into this team going, okay, this is a good team, but we got to watch out for that one. I'm
Yeah.
not doing that with the Devontae Parkers and the, even Juju Smith-Schuster. He's the last I saw in my fantasy. He was the very last pick of the draft, and as like a last receiver because no one really wants to touch him because you don't know what you're really getting if Mac Jones is throwing in the ball.
Yeah.
You know, he he just won a championship in Kansas City. That's great. He has always had Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Then you go to Mac Jones, and now it's a totally different situation. And Mac Jones should have never even been. I shouldn't say you shouldn't have been the starter, but should have had to work for it. The fact that they came out a week after the season ended saying he's our number one guy, no pressure there. And then, Belichick had completely sat still this entire time. And I feel like, not to make this a comparison to between sports, but I feel like when you have someone that sticks around too long past their prime or their regime, you start to outsmart yourself. And I feel like that's what happens with the Yankees in baseball, where you have a management that's been around way too long. They've seen the highest of the highs, and then now you're just holding on to that. Like you're so lost in the history and the greatness that you achieved that you think that you can outsmart the next guy. And then you
Jerry
realize later
Jones.
on how far behind you really are. And I feel like the Patriots are going to be the worst team in the division this year. And it's not even going to be close to the point where I think they're going to say at the end of the year that Belichick and, the owner, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name. He's
Kraft.
super famous. Kraft, thank
See,
you.
see,
Have
I remember that one.
yeah, amazing, right? Yeah, I know he's got a huge brand, but I think they'll say they mutually agree to part ways. They'll never say they fired him. They'll never say, whatever. But I think this is the absolute last year of Belichick as a Patriot coach and especially as a general manager. If you're gonna do nothing for 2 off seasons in a row and do almost the bare minimum, and you're not even going to address the quarterback situation or even bring it to a competitive level, like you could bring in Carson Wentz and make it competitive. You don't even have to do anything with him, but you could make it competitive. Carson Wentz and oh my god, see now I blank on
Mac
every name.
Jones.
Mac Jones. See, this is what I do in the MMA podcast. It's amazing. Um, make it competitive. Mac Jones should win the job, but at least make him work for it. The fact that you're going Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi, it's like, what are we talking about?
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
the team is built on mediocrity, and it's just going to be the same thing. Now. I think it's going to be a lot worse because you're facing the NFC East this year, and that all those teams are really good. So I expect, honestly, if I had to make a prediction, I think they get maybe 6 wins. And
Whoa.
yep, I don't see them
Damn.
being better than
God damn.
any. I don't see them beating maybe the Commanders, but I think Commanders are gonna be a great team this year. I think people are lost with them, and I don't see them beating. I don't see them beating the Bills. I don't see them beating the Dolphins unless, obviously at home they're really good at home. I expect the Jets to beat the curse and beat them twice. Honestly, like I just think that's what's the way it's going to happen, and I think this is a whole new regime we're about to see. This is like the final last stand of the old regime, and we're going to have a brand new Patriots, come in 2024.
Dude, I couldn't disagree with both of you guys more. I think what they've been able to do in the last 2 years, when you consider everything, is actually pretty remarkable. Signing, what is his name, Hunter Henry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And creating a dual tight end threat on their team. That was a big, substantial moment. Finding Ramondre Stevenson as a late round pick, that
Yeah.
was another remarkable moment. Um,
Yeah.
I think if Mac Jones is able to perform as you would expect a second round quarterback to perform in their second year, then we we off to the races, baby. I think being the worst team in this division um isn't exactly the same situation as being the worst team in a worse division. I
Mm.
think you could be the worst team in this division and still be vying for a playoff spot. So
Yeah.
I don't think this is that tainted. I personally think that there will never be a situation where if Belichick is willing to coach football, that they won't make it work. Just consider the history, right? Mike Tomlin is still uh, fortified strong in that Steelers organization, and
But he's
he
bringing
has
them to the
not
playoffs.
accomplished nowhere near what Bill Belichick has been able to accomplish with the Pats. I can see what you're saying as far as there needs to be a reliance on actual production versus history, and I agree on that. But at the end of the day, I think they are in the midst of a fucking rebuild. So to think that we're expecting them to be these world beaters in the first place, um, is kind of crazy. And the fact that we start these seasons in the same place every year, where it's like, man, sneaky contender, right? Like sneaky
Mm-hmm.
contender. Um, there's never a time, and I don't know. Maybe you feel a little bit differently this year with your Jets. I can't wait to let you go on that one. To just rev up the engines and let Sean go on that one. But I can't imagine a time in my fandom, right, as a Ravens fan, seeing the Patriots on the schedule and being like, "Oh, that's an easy win." Like, no matter what the situation is, I think this is a competitive team, and that alone will keep Belichick's job, in my opinion. So
But based on a fantasy perspective, though,
Yeah.
like, are you looking at it the same way? Because I don't know. Maybe based off last year, Ramondre, I think you can say you can rely on him to do what he needs to do. But from a fantasy perspective, everyone that's on that team, you're not looking at the whole defense and saying you need to get that defense as drafted, right?
you should,
You're not.
in my opinion,
Good.
you
They're
should.
good. They're a good defense. I would say they're probably like
They're
a
good
top
defense, but
seven
I'm saying
defense.
like, are you going? So I like
I
I
could see
like
them getting
drafting.
picked up.
Yeah, but I like drafting my defense kind of earlier than everyone else, right? Like I
Yeah,
like
you
going in
won't
the
touch
top.
them.
Yeah, I'm not touching them. Yeah, I like they might be a backup defense. Like I might get them as my
Yeah.
backup defense, but I'm not looking at them as saying like they're a must have, right? But on the offense, aside from Ramondre, you're not looking at them as saying that any of those guys are a must have, right?
I would say Ramondre is probably your best bet. I wanted
Right.
to agree with you with the Hunter Henry. I love Hunter Henry. I loved him
Me too.
on the Chargers. But at the same
Yeah.
time, in a fantasy perspective, he only had 2 receiving touchdowns. So you're
Yeah.
in 509 yards. So you're really not getting any sort of like significant tight end value. I remember I was constantly trying to pick him up. This is gonna be the week, and then I get disappointed with 2 points, and you're like,
Yeah.
damn it! Like it just
Might as well not have had
kind of
anybody
hoping
really.
because if you don't get the top 5 tight end, top 3 tight ends, you're kind of just picking and choosing who's gonna be the guy, like the tight end
Mm-hmm.
in Pittsburgh or Fire Firemuth or
Briar Muth, yep.
thank you. Like I can't say names, but he was no one thought about him until he came out, and that's like then you kind of that's where you kind of were finding, and that's what I was
Mm-hmm.
hoping for with Hunter Henry that this like he'd have one breakout week, and then it was like okay, this is it. But he wasn't on a fantasy value. I still love him as a player. He's a great, great,
Yeah.
great tight end, but I just don't. look at anyone on this team, especially him, that I go, man, you know what? I could take him as a backup tight end. Feel confident because it's pretty up in the air, especially when you have a quarterback like that. Which, by the way, Mac Jones is a first round quarterback, 15th overall from Alabama. But you said second
I
round pick.
know. No, I said if he performs as you would expect
Oh,
a
okay,
second
okay.
rounder
I
too,
thought you said
then he's
he's
gonna have a
15th.
good year. The
Okay.
expectations of him has honestly tainted why everyone feels like he's a shitty quarterback. Watch the tape. He's better
It's
than
tough too
majority of
because
quarterbacks in the league, and I'll say that very confident.
yeah, it's tough too because no matter I know Cam Newton was there, but he was really looked at as the replacement for Tom. I know Cam Newton was there for a year, but he was really the expectations for him were always going to be impossible to reach. Like but I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback, but I don't think he is a top 15. I don't think he's a in the first half of great quarterbacks yet. I don't. I would say he's in the top 20, maybe, but I think with
Definitely a good
this year
backup to
being a
have.
rebuild, like you said, nobody except for Ramondre, which I think teams are going to be very alert on that now. The fact he only had 7 starts and hit 1,000 yards, he broke out so quickly. I think teams are going to be a little aware of that, and the fact that Mac Jones is going to run this like green light, red light options, quick little routes, especially to Juju over the middle. So it's going to be a lot of small, quick plays, just like how they did with Tom Brady when he started getting old. So I see that, but I'm not sure, honestly, on a fantasy value.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what year two Mac Jones has in store for us because I think this might be the one that I'm on the lonely island for the majority of the time, but come the end of the season we might be in agreement. So interested to see how this one
Why do you
plays
why do
out
you why do you say year two?
because this is the full Mac Jones experience year two.
This is
Yeah.
the it's
He
kind of
was a
like
backup. He was backup his first year.
yeah. Well, 2021 he
And who do you have?
started.
Right? Like
Okay,
as
but
far as
in
being in an actual
2021,
situation, right?
2021 he started every game and threw for almost 4,000 yards. That was a great year. Last year he threw for under 3,000 yards and he got
And got
replaced by
injured
Zappy.
for
Yeah,
a
yeah.
significant amount of time. Yep.
We're kind of looking at year three here. I'm just, I'm not trying to hurt you. I,
Yeah.
I could see
Hey,
you're sort of like a
hey,
second team Patriots fan here. I'm starting to sniff it a little bit, but like it's on year three here.
hey.
I don't want to
I
take away from your Ravens, but the
shout out
Patriots
my
are a
guy.
good team.
Shout out my guy Lewis. I have been screaming "fuck Tom Brady" out the window of my Honda Civic for many years. So trust me, I'm not a
Me
closeted
too, buddy.
Patriots
Me
fan.
too. Me
But when
too.
it comes to real, recognize real, right? And at the end of the day, the reason why I'm looking at this as the second full year, right, is we've got a retooled offense, right? This is the first time we can actually let go of the reins, right, and figure out what we have here, versus doing screen passes to get you to 3,000 yards. That's one way to get there, right? But actually being a performing quarterback is a little bit of a difference. He gets a lot of flack, and I think no matter what, expectations will be the downfall of this Patriots team, just because greatness is a hard bar to achieve. Ask Greg Popovich, right? They're they're in the same situation, right? In my opinion.
Yeah.
So really interested to see whether or not I'm overestimating this team. I might be, right? I might be. I definitely might be. I just think to think that this team is going to go from where they were last year in nightmare scenarios, right? For a lot of their starters, um, to think they're going to regress from that feels a little off to me when I feel they got better on paper. But once again, the division got difficult around them too, and that's
Yes.
the biggest thing to cap. And I agree as far as fantasy implications. I'm not touching nobody with the 10-foot pole on this team,
Yeah.
so gonna be a tough one. I'm arguing a tough point here. I'm selling a hard
Yeah.
bargain,
Yeah.
but I'm hyped to see the conversation change on this as the year goes on. Anyway, Sean, it is your time to shine, brother. I want you to be honest first about what it's like to be a Jets fan, what it's like to be breathing the air that somehow it was green and polluted before, right? But now there's something a little bit more homely about it. What does it feel like to be on the cusp of what you feel like is a good season, right? But also, how do those expectations meet reality for you when you think about this year?
Very nerve-wracking. It's very, very scary when you're the joke of the league for the last decade, and then so quickly you're made to be the most important team of the NFL season. You get 6 primetime games when you had 6 primetime games in like 7 years. Um, that is very difficult. I'm excited but petrified of this season. It just like I was saying with the Bills, it comes down to one person, and that one person is Aaron Rodgers at 39, 40 years old, and it has to work. So when you're putting all your eggs in one basket, making sure that this has to work so quickly, it cannot work. And it as a Jet fan, I have been through it all. I have seen the worst of the worst. I saw moments of greatness with Chad Pennington, and then I saw a beacon of hope with Brett Favre for a year, thinking that was what this is gonna, what I thought this was gonna be. It's exactly what it was, except 15 years earlier. And then he tore his rotator cuff like on week 9, and then it went downhill from there. He tried to play through it. It was a completely different quarterback. Started 8-3, finished 9-7, missed the playoffs. I hope that does not happen this year. And then we went to the Sanchez era, and we went to
Buffalo.
2 AFC Championship games. And I always thought if Brett Favre didn't decide to fake retire and go to the Vikings, and he stayed with the Jets and the team that we had built in 2009, 2010, I firmly believe we would have won the Super Bowl, because our biggest weakness was we had no quarterback. Sanchez was a horrible quarterback. He had 12 touchdowns and 20 interceptions, and it brought us to the AFC Championship game. It was like Blake Bortles with the Jaguars. Like, he was a terrible quarterback, but the defense was so good that it will bring you there. But you have to win. You have to score above 17 points eventually. And then after that, we went through the worst of quarterbacks. I could say a zillion quarterbacks that you probably never heard of or you don't want to ever hear again. And we instead of picking Josh Allen, we picked with Sam Darnold, and look what that got us. It brought us all the way to this moment. Zach Wilson, God, the
Were you
worst
a
quarterback.
believer before
Hell
before
no. Oh my
ever?
God.
Never.
Never. I remember the day we picked him, and I was so angry because I knew he would never have the it factor in the NFL. You're going from BYU. You're a small guy with zero ACC, SEC, any sort of real experience in college football. You are secluded to your little division, and you think that that is a second overall pick. I was so angry when we decided to beat the Rams to get the second overall pick to lose. I remember that game so specifically. We were 0-12, and we were supposed to lose to the Rams at home. And we decided we're going to play football for the first time in 17 games, and we're going to win a football game. And we decided to beat the Rams, who are a playoff team. And we lost the option to get the first pick, and we got the second pick. So we lost on Trevor Lawrence. I would rather have Trevor Lawrence in this situation now than what has happened. Granted, obviously Rodgers is a better quarterback, but this is a quick 2-year plan. And Zach, well, you could not ask for a franchise quarterback in Jacksonville and the worst quarterback in the entire NFL in Zach Wilson. So that's who you have. You have Aaron Rodgers, who's a top 5 quarterback. If he goes down, you're going back to the worst thing to ever throw a football in the National Football League as your backup. He is one of the worst quarterbacks I've ever seen. He is. I hope that the mentorship of Aaron Rodgers makes him a better quarterback, but he is so god awful. I cannot stand him. So this entire season, this entire team, this entire hype, every single game comes down to 100% healthy Aaron Rodgers. I'm dying over it, as you can see. But oh my God. That's how. Oh my God, I can't even speak. I almost swallowed a fly. But that's
Yeah.
how. That's how crucial. That's how much it scares me, because it's literally all or nothing now. You have 2 years of you have to win it. You have to win it all in 2 years. And I love the fact that Rodgers took the humongous pay cut and is open to bringing in players and who knows what happened with Dalvin Cook and the Devontae Adams if that ever happens mid-season if he wants to get out of there. Like there's a lot of options there. But if we're gonna turn this whole thing around and keep this fantasy related, the Jets defense is the number one thing I'm taking. Has to be. Because regardless of Rodgers or not, the Jets defense is going to have to play to a perfect level to be a 10, 11, 12, 13 win team. Rodgers can be great, and we've saw it with so many years with Rodgers in Green Bay, where Rodgers was fantastic, but the defense was so bad that it just, he's fighting to win games. And last year they were a little bit better on defense, but we had years where Packers were going down with the Saints as one of the worst defenses you'll ever see. And I think now that Rodgers finally has a top 5, top 3 defense in the league, that's who I'm going with because regardless of Rodgers healthy or not, my safe option is taking, just like Derrick was saying, he picks defenses early. That's who I would take early. And that's who I would go in a fantasy. Huh?
How early are you taking them?
Ooh, because I don't take defenses early. But the second, I'm usually the person that goes, okay, I saw someone take defense. That's who I'm going to get now. Because
right.
once someone does it, everyone has that mindset. Ooh, so everyone's going to start taking. And then that's when I go. So someone's always going to pick like, the Cowboys or the Chiefs or the, the Bills defense first. No one's going to pick the Jets first. Who the hell would ever pick the Jets first? So as soon as I see that, that would be my safe pick. Go for the Jets defense every single time. The Jets defense is probably the most under talked about thing going on. But they're going to be obviously Sauce Gardner's not, but the rest of the team is going to be freaking really, really good. And I can't wait to see that unfold. It's just Rodgers' health that's going to be the complete X factor, or whether this team's a 8-win team, 9-win team, or a 13-win team and a potential division winner. I'm done with my rant.
Incredible, honestly. One of the better moments on the show. Derrick, what did you have for us?
I mean, I'm a little. I get where you're coming from. I am slightly a little shocked though, because like before we started recording, I was telling Chris earlier. I'm actually looking forward to seeing what the Jets do this year. I think from a fantasy perspective, Aaron Rodgers is going to do his thing. But I think Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall are the two on offense that really intrigue me. Then I want to say that like the X factor on the team is going to be Lazard, and I don't know why he's coming to my mind so much when I think about the Jets. But Lazard is one of those guys that I'm looking at as a huge X factor that people are going to really forget about him, and that he's just going to open up wide and do some damage from a fantasy perspective. He might be one of those guys that you look at. What, Chris? What?
I mean, he's gonna open up wide and do some damage. It's crazy, bro. Like
I think so. I'm talking about from a fantasy perspective.
I know. I'm talking about from a pause perspective, but continue.
Oh, my bad. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Pause. Jesus, bro. I'm tired, man.
A fantasy perspective. Oh.
There
goes the fantasies we were talking about.
Yeah. Forgive me, bro. Fantasy thoughts. But no, I think that him as a flex option. I think Lazard as a flex option would be pretty intriguing. Or one of those guys you just have on your bench. Because I don't think he's going to be one of those receivers that people draft early anyway, or even the midway point. I don't think that people are going to draft him as much as some might think. But I think that he's going to be one of those players that's going to be a high impact player from a fantasy perspective.
That's a great show. I actually really like both of those receivers. Obviously Garrett Wilson is the big hype, right? Being able to perform the way he did with that mockery of a quarterback room last year. So I could only imagine what he could do with Aaron Rodgers. I just feel like no matter how I slice it, there's so many things I don't trust about this offensive pieces, right? Like Breece Hall is very good and is only 22 years old, right? Has a ton of upside. Breece Hall just came off of a huge injury, right? A devastating injury. Aaron Rodgers, like we said, is old as hell and coming off of a darkness retreat. I don't think that helps anyone. It hasn't helped many people in the past. Um,
Yeah.
I feel like Aaron Rodgers has been particularly sensitive to media narratives in the past. And the fact that you have now put yourself to the largest scrutiny possible, right? Like, this
Yeah.
is a team. I live in New York, right? I see this. I think Jets fans, with all due respect, are a little bit more rational than Giants fans. I think every year they feel that they're contending, no matter how far away they are. Obviously, now they have a realistic expectation, right?
Yeah.
Considering what was put around this team, but at the same time, we're so far from seeing that in actuality, right? We've saw a lot of good flashes last year. I agree 100%. I picked them to beat the Bills that game. I'm just saying, I was there. Derrick was there too. I was there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of faith in this team. I will not be surprised if this team ends up hovering around that sort of 9-win mark with 3 games left in the season.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows if they even make their way around that. And once again, that's not even me considering schedule. That's just me wondering aloud how things can kind of go, especially in such a stacked division. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, I agree that there's a lot of upside here. Um, I think when it comes to offenses and high-powered offenses to look forward to this season, I think this one is the most sexy, right? The most talked about. But at the same time, I think it is also the most unproven. And one that we have no idea really how it's gonna look until we see it in prime time, right? So there's big boom bust potential for this team. And it kind of freaks me out when you consider that, yeah, the defense is rising and is good. But it's not like, in my opinion, you guys are expected at this point to be a top 5 defense every year, right? Like I feel like they're they're floating around that 15-7 mark. Thing sputters along the way with Aaron Rodgers. We got some problems. So, Sean, air me out. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Just gonna get through the negativity real quick. But no, you know what? See, here's the thing. I would love nothing more than what you just said, to be honest with you. If we're a 9-win team with around 3 to 4 weeks to go, that's perfect for me. Because those final the end of the season for the Jets is a lot easier. Facing the Commanders at home, Cleveland at on the road, and then the Patriots on the road, which is never easy, but it's more winnable now than it's ever been. The beginning of the season's the toughest. It's the fact of facing the Bills, the Cowboys, then you face the Patriots, and then you get the Chiefs, you get the Broncos, Eagles, Giants, Chargers, Raiders, and it's like that's a tough spread right off the bat. There's some winnable games there,
Ooh,
but
that's a crazy schedule.
oh yeah, we have one of the I think we have number 5 or 4 toughest schedules in football for the first half of the year. And then the second half, we have like 25th or something. Like, so that's why in the beginning, Jets fans need to be ready for the fact that we might play 500 till like week 10. And then you need to be ready for once you're 5-5 or you're 5 because we're hit the bye, I think week 9 or something like that, week 8, or week 7. Um, Once you get past, let's say, the Chargers, then or even the Raiders in Vegas, then it should be smooth sailing. That's when the win streak should happen. And I expect the Jets to be around 9 to 10 wins with around 3 weeks to go. And I expect them to win at least 12 games this year. I don't know how many wins I expect with the Bills. They're going to have the same schedule, just a little tiny bit different, slated in different directions. But it really depends. If Rodgers 100% healthy, will Allen be 100% healthy? Will Tua be 100% healthy? Like Mac Jones is going to be Mac Jones regardless of what happens. If he goes down, Zappy's kind of in the same level, a little less than him, but you're not expecting anything from the Patriots this year, right? They're the only team of the 4 that are in the rebuild. So
Mm-hmm.
they're going to be good again. I don't know how much longer they're expecting to wait or what the deal is there. But the Jets are in this win now, so they have to win. And I think with all the pressure and all the prime time games, it's could it depends on how much a Jets team is willing to die for it. Honestly, you go from being the joke, you go from playing every game at 1 o'clock, no one gives a shit, and playing. You got 100 people watching the games because no one cares if the Jets lose 34-0. To you played a better year. You had the worst offense because Zach Wilson's terrible, but the defense was impressive. Defense was top five. Okay, okay. Build a quarterback. Now you have this super team, which I expect Dalvin Cook to still sign, even though I do think he goes to Miami because I think it's all just a leverage thing. And he's just going to go to Miami because that's where he's from. But if he ends up coming to the Jets, then you build, you could kind of pull the reins back on Brees Hall a little bit, keep him. You don't have to fully throw him out there with the ACL injury and all that. Alan Lazard's definitely a fantasy thing I'm looking at because the history slot option. Alan Lazard is perfect in the slot. I think he's going to be great there. I'm not a huge fan of Corey Davis. I think he's a great player. I just don't. It could change, and I've only seen Corey Davis with the worst quarterback ever, so I could see it with someone like Aaron Rodgers. Corey Davis going from Tannehill to Zach Wilson. Tannehill is like good on that, but so I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see. But I know I talk too much, but I'm excited for this season.
What about Randall Cobb?
Randall, yeah, the fifth and sixth. I can't wait to see him on special teams. He's going to be a
Yeah,
great option on special teams, running the last possible wide receiver all the way to the left, and he'll probably get like 7 to 10 catches all year.
yeah. That's the story to look out for.
I like it though because you know what? He's
Yeah.
going to be the veteran presence for Garrett. I've been in
Oh
your
yeah,
shoes.
no, for sure.
I
For
have
sure.
I have been the best of the best. I've had him when he was at in his 20s. I know exactly what he can do, and I'm going to bring you to exponential, crazy place that you're going to be the best receiver, one of the best receivers in football. And Garrett Wilson's already being looked at that way, and I love that. You have the offensive rookie of the year, you have the defensive rookie of the year. Brees Hall would have been the offensive rookie of the year. You have a lot of young pieces, centered around a legend and quarterback. It has the potential to be something incredible, especially with that defense. But will it be that way? New York media, New York Jets have always had the curse. Will it break for the first time? I don't know.
Sean, you're in rare form today. I just gotta commend you for that, dude.
I'm sorry. I
Perfect.
know I talked way too much here, but
Dude, don't apologize.
Nah,
You and
nah,
Matt,
you good.
this is 2 days in a
Yeah,
row now. I have to remind you guys, this is what we show up here to do. There's no
we
reason to
gotta
be
talk.
apologetic. Great
Yeah,
shit. Honestly, this was fucking amazing. Kind of like a fever
yeah,
dream almost. Or a couple moments there, I'm like, is this really happening? Like, I'm like, pinch me because this is fucking amazing. So great stuff. I
yeah.
really appreciate it. We went over. Unfortunately, we are only going to be able to cover this division, but I'm sure you're going to be looking forward to more divisional coverage with all the stuff you got here. This was an awesome
Yes.
episode. Thank you so much, you guys, once again for tuning in. We really appreciate all your love and support, and are looking forward to continue to catering to what you actually enjoy. Right. So let us know what that is. Let us know what you're enjoying. Let us know what you're liking, so we can continue to deliver for you guys on those fronts. So now, before we get out of here, let's just one more time give them the roundup. Let them know where they can find you, so that we can keep bringing all this awesome content into your lives.
ooh,
Gotcha.
all right. If you're not sick of my voice yet, you can find me at Sean Negron 26. Again, and I have a website at BS Reports. I have my own baseball podcast at That's Baseball. I have my own other football podcasts at the National Fan Loop. I'm doing so many things, and then you hear me here on the MMA podcast we got here. I'm everywhere. I try to be, and I like to dip my hand in everything, but more importantly, if you are ever considering getting started in writing, podcasting, anything remotely sports related, hit me up on my personal, and I will help you at all costs. There's so many people that have reached out, and I appreciate it. And I've helped everyone as much as I can, and it doesn't bother me at all. Reach out, I will help you, and I will get you started.
Yes, sir.
Awesome
Yes,
stuff,
sir.
man.
Yeah. You can follow me at Derrick _OTS. That's DERRICK, Black way to spell it.
Yes, sir. And you can find me at Negron MMA on Twitter as well as on TikTok. That's a brand new edition. I'm working on it, you guys. I'm trying,
Hey.
okay? I'm a little, hey, my girl keeps calling me old, right? Because I can't figure these things out. But I'm working. We efforting over here. So make sure you follow me over there, run that up, as well as on Instagram at Chris Negron _. As always, a real pleasure to be on with you guys. Looking forward to doing more stuff with you guys. And we'll catch you guys on the next installment of our fantasy thoughts. We'll see you guys next time. Peace.